Hey guys, today we're going to talk about South America. So lots of countries in this one to talk about. Especially, and we're going to look kind of at the differences between the Spanish-speaking country and then the big Portuguese-speaking country, and kind of a little bit of the differences in those and the dynamic in that. So, pretty interesting day today. Okay, so population patterns. The people are pretty ethnically diverse. Most of the indigenous groups live in the Andes regions of Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. So that's that western coast of South America where the Andes run through. The Spanish and the Portuguese were the first to colonize South America. We'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later, how the difference between them. But the enslaved Africans were brought in as laborers once the native population started to die out. The Europeans had to replace that labor. So that's once again we talked about this with the Caribbean too. They had to replace that labor, so that's why they were bringing Africans over. But in recent years, they've seen a lot of immigration, especially from Asia, that have moved in. As far as density and distribution, they have a very high rate of population growth in comparison to other places around them, in particular North America. But most of them live on the coast. Most of the people live on the coast. In the middle, there's rainforests. Obviously, the big, huge rainforest is right in the middle of South America. There's deserts, and then the mountains. They're not really ideal for human living, so most people live on the coast where there's a more favorable climate, there's fertile land, and then easy access to transportation. Um, Brazil wanted to move people away from the coast, and so they moved their capital to what is now called Brasilia. Okay, so this right here shows the population distribution, so you can see the differences here in how, like, once again, most of the people live on the coast, except for this dot right here, and that is where Brasilia is. Okay, so emigration. So there's a search for better wages, living conditions, and escaping civil war that has led many people to actually leave South America. And so they've experienced what's called a brain drain. So a brain drain is a loss of the more highly educated and skilled workers to other countries. So about 80% of the population is urban, and so they've seen a lot of urbanization as well. But that comes with a lot of challenges. So cities like Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Buenos Aires rank among the world's 15 largest urban areas. But there is a very big gap between the rich and the poor, especially in Brazil. They have favelas. Okay, so favelas are slums, and these are usually on the outskirts of the cities. And this is kind of a picture here of what that might look like. And I'll show you some more pictures in just a second. But wealthy neighborhoods are actually hidden behind gates or walls. But the major challenges that are really facing the cities is housing, obviously, employment, infrastructure is crumbling in a lot of places. Crime is always an issue in cities, and then traffic, obviously. Okay, so this right here is a favela. This is outside Rio de Janeiro, and this is an old mine that people just kind of built their houses into. And so this is where they live. These are their houses. So it's pretty cramped, obviously, and difficult to get in and out of. But it was cheap, and so that's where they landed. Okay, so history and government. So the early cultures. So before the Inca, and we will talk about the Inca, there were the Moche, the Mapuche, and the Aymara, and these societies were largely based on agriculture. But then the Inca are going to develop in the Andes, specifically in Peru. Okay, so from about Ecuador to central Chile, but their capital, Cusco, and the majority of their population lives in Peru. So the emperor and then the high priest and the army commander, they exercise complete control over the people. The lower classes were your farmers, artisans, and laborers. And then they had skilled engineers who built temples, fortresses, and roads, and they actually cut terraces. So they live in the mountains in the Andes here, and you can see how they cut terraces into the mountains in order to farm and they even built irrigation systems. But there was a lot of silver and gold that gave them great wealth, and this is eventually going to lead to the Spanish conquistadors coming to Peru in search of that gold. Okay, so this right here shows the different tribes and kind of where they were. So you can see this right here is where the Incans were, okay, in this general vicinity here. Okay. So European conquest. So Francisco Pizarro is going to be the conquistador that is going to take over the Incas. So he arrived in the Incan Empire in 1535, and they were already in a civil war. Okay, so they were already weak, and so Pizarro just won pretty easily. So from Peru, the Spanish conquistadors expanded into Colombia, Argentina, and Chile, and they found gold and silver. So one of the interesting things about the takeover of the Inca is the way Pizarro did it. So what he did was he captured the emperor, and he held him for ransom, and then he said he wanted a room. I don't remember how big it was. I want to say like 16 by 20 or something, like a big room. Just fill it with gold and silver. And so they did, and then Pizarro took it and then killed the emperor anyway and took over the Inca. And then to reward him for all of his stuff, they just continue to find more gold and silver along the way. And so that's why they're going to expand. The Spanish conquerors are going to expand, like I said, into Colombia, into Argentina and Chile, where they're going to find more and more. And then the Portuguese are going to settle on the other side. They're going to settle on the eastern side on the coast of Brazil. And so there's precious metals and Brazil wood. Brazil wood is used to make red dye. But the British, French, and the Dutch settled in northern South America, where they found coffee, sugarcane, and cotton. And then Europeans set up highly structured political systems, and their colonies, like I said before, are ruled by a viceroy. So that was a royally appointed official who answered to the king. But epidemic diseases are going to drastically reduce the native populations. So like I said before, to meet these labor shortages, the Europeans are going to start to bring in African slaves. Independence. So inspired by the American and French revolutions, the South Americans are going to start their independence movement. So they're going to be led by Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín. Obviously, Bolivia is named after Bolivar. But only Brazil will actually become independent without violence. Excuse me. Suriname actually gained independence most recently in 1975. But French Guiana is still part of France, and it's literally a part of France. Like, it's not, it's literally considered France. So when you talk about like the European country that's closest to the United States, it's France because it's Suriname. It's right there, but it's French Guiana. It's like right there. So the politically and economically unstable countries, the newly countries, they became politically and economically unstable after independence. And then, so like with Mexico, the power is going to remain with the elites. So a caudillo or dictator is going to emerge in most of these countries, and there have been movements for change. So dictators in more recent years have given way to democratic governments, and they're trying to end the corrupt politics and violence that was brought about by the dictators, and they definitely need to address the gap between the rich and the poor. There's a major poverty issue all throughout South America, particularly in the cities. Very high crime rates and unemployment. So language and religion. So Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and French are spoken primarily in South America. So in Brazil, their language is Portuguese, which is really similar to Spanish because Portugal and Spain are on the same peninsula called the Iberian Peninsula, so their languages developed very similarly. but many native languages have also survived as well. Most people are Roman Catholic because the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French, incidentally, are Catholic, and so they brought their religion with them when they took control. But some practice kind of like mixed religions, like Macumba, Candomblé, and those combine like the Western African with the Roman Catholicism. So kind of that syncretism that we talked about when we talked about Mexico. But others practice are Protestant Christianity. So, like in the Dutch areas up in North South America, there's more Protestantism. The Asian immigrants have brought over Hinduism, Buddhism, Shinto, and then Islam, Judaism, and Eastern Orthodoxy are also practiced. As far as education and healthcare, so literacy rates have risen in recent years, and they do actually have public universities that do provide education for free. But other countries, in some countries, education is just considered a luxury. It kind of depends on which country you're in. But countries that have stable economies do have better healthcare. But others have concerns related to poverty, like we've been talking about. So like lack of sanitation, malnutrition, spread of infectious diseases, things of that nature. The arts, so the traditional arts are weaving, ceramics, and metalworking. One of the really distinctive types of music is with using the panpipe. Okay, so this is from pre-Columbian times, so before Columbus got to the New World. But the musical traditions now mix the Native American with African and European influences. The Roman Catholic churches that are built in the Spanish and Portuguese designs still stand. So here's a picture of one of them. They're very, very ornate, often enlivened by color. So we've talked about that a lot too. With the Latin American version of Catholicism is much more upbeat and colorful than like the European version of Catholicism. So, family life and leisure. So the urban upper and middle classes, the family is a nuclear household. So that means mom, dad, and kids all live together. They do value the compadre relationship. So that's the godparents that we've talked about. Soccer is definitely the most popular sport in South America. But others that are also popular: polo, auto racing, tennis, boxing, basketball, all very popular. But social and leisure center around the family, around patriotic events and religious feasts and festivals. One of the biggest holidays that is celebrated is Carnival, and this is celebrated the week before Lent. So this is when we would celebrate Mardi Gras. And Rio de Janeiro has the largest Carnival celebration in the world. And they have these parades, and they make these floats, and these crazy floats. They have hundreds, thousands of people in these parades. And they go down what's called the Sambadrome, and this is right here. And they go through these parades, and they dance, and they sing, and it takes about an hour and a half to get from one end to the other. But they're judged, and each neighborhood competes with one another on who's going to have like the best parade. And it's a huge, huge deal, huge honor to win for your neighborhood. So pretty cool. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Don't forget to do your processor 10 test questions. Make sure you highlight the correct answers, and that includes all 10 have to have answers. Okay, bye.